Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. We're the biggest freewheeling live stream poetry podcast on the planet, in your ears and on your laptops. Our guest for episode number 337 is Brendan Constantine. He'll be here with us in just a few minutes, and we'll also, after that segment, be joined by our new prompt poet of the month. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. All we ask is that you please do help spread the word by sharing this. Make sure you click to subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, that's fine too. Tell anybody to watch the Rattlecast, share, participate in the great journey that is poetry. That's all we're trying to do. So help us out along the way and click that like button. All right, so we are going to start out with our Poets Respond poem. Dave Bonta was a poet of the week this week, and I'm going to share his. It was a haiku sequence. And about that, Dave said this. Let me get it on screen and share it for you. Dave said, "Oh, for a silent spring, and not one filled with explosions and implosions and the unhinged truths of Mad King Donald. But imperial conquest of one sort or another has been going on for more than 500 years, and spring, whether silent or otherwise, is mostly a parade of invasive species now." That's what Dave said about this poem. And here is his haiku sequence. It's been a while since we published a haiku sequence in Rattle and Poets Respond, anyway. And this is Dave's. It's called April Fools, which is a great title for a sequence here. The falsetto cry of a crow father. No elegy, my hillbilly lungs filling with fog. Time to turn the garden over. Whistling wings of a woodcock over the graves. Our pie in the sky so full of craters. Hyacinths transplanted from childhood, that old world, forcing our way through a forest of privet. Four choppers low over the trees, the war is here. There's your haiku sequence. That was April Fools by Dave Bonta. That was your poem of the day on Rattle.com. If you have any poems about current events, they don't have to be the big news. I know there's a lot of big news going on right now. A lot of history is happening in not the best ways. So if you have poems about that, please do share. If you have poems about smaller things, we had poems about whales last week. We had poems, all sorts of things, whatever is going on in the news. If you find a news story and are inspired to write a poem about it, share that poem by Friday night at midnight, and we'll get to publish one poem every Sunday. So go to Rattle.com. Over on content, you'll find Poets Respond, and that's where to submit. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Brendan Constantine. So sit tight and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. We're back. Thanks for your patience. Today's guest, like I said, is Brendan Constantine. Brendan first appeared on Rattlecast number 108. He's back with a brand new book from Red Hen Press, The Opposites Game. Brendan is a poet based in Los Angeles. His work has appeared in many of the nation's standard magazines, including Poetry, The Nation, Best American Poetry, Ploughshares, Tin House, and of course, many episodes or issues of Rattle. A popular performer, Brennan has presented his work to audiences throughout the U.S. and Europe, also appearing on NPR's All Things Considered, TED ED, numerous podcasts, and YouTube like this. Brennan currently teaches at the Windward School and the Los Angeles Community Museum of Art. Since 2017, he's been developing poetry workshops for people with aphasia and traumatic brain injuries, which we talked about a lot last time. And it's great to have you back, Brennan. Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, well, it's such a pleasure. I said this in the last time you were on, but you're one of my favorite poets. Like, if you were giving a reading somewhere and I was like anywhere near there, I'd go, I'd drive, ride a horse, whatever it took to get to see you. Because you are very entertaining, and your poems are real, solid, strong poems every time they come out, it seems. And then you perform them with such entertaining vigor, too. And it's great to always share poetry and share the stage with us. So glad you could be here.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say.
Well, do you want to start out right off the bat with a poem from the book, an early one?
Sure.
A poem for R, yeah.
Yeah, and shout out to Russ Tamblyn and the Tamblyn family. I think of this poem as a poem for Russ in a lot of ways, and debuted at his birthday. This is the poem for R. The poem on the lake. The poem with a checkered blanket. The poem in which a great painting is described and then sold at auction, leaving the poem empty, unreadable. The poem in which the moon compares itself to people and their things. The poem about a cow named Alan. The poem shaped like a field. The poem in which Christ pockets all the money donated in his name and walks off muttering to himself. The poem with room for milk and sugar. The poem in its mid-50s. The poem written in a strict form based on the stages of grief, emphasizing meter and denial. The poem in which a dog returns to say, love is a kind of tennis ball thrown into the night, a thing glowing in grass just enough to find it, but still faint enough to be lost with no blame. There is no blame, the dog says. You were busy and I didn't live long. Be happy we met at all. The poem made of red cups, the poem written on a hat, the poem prescribed by a doctor who makes a second appointment to read it to you under supervision. The poem tied up in traffic, the poem in which the word skull is capitalized, the poem punishable by song. The poem in which hyperbole is pronounced so incorrectly people actually die. The poem that doesn't end with the ghost of a dog. The poem of exquisite regret. The poem that delivers itself on the way to the hospital. The poem of swift justice. The poem of just swiftness. The poem lovely as the letter R.
Yeah, and that was the opening poem from The Opposites Game.
It's the first poem of the book, yes.
The poem for R, yeah. And it really gives a sense, because it feels like your life is a life bathed in poetry. You teach students poetry, you do poetry workshops, you all the books, I'm sure you've read all the books on the massive shelf behind you.
The wailing wall of poetry back here, yes.
Yeah, and there's a way that poetry is in your blood, it's in your veins. And these poems feel like a kind of buffet of all that. There's so much going on here.
Thank you for saying so.
And it made me wonder how you went about putting this together as a collection. How did you know which poems to fit and which poems to move? They do have a feel of, and I'm not sure how true this is, they have a feel of being written after the prompts that you give to your students, like The Opposite Game overtly is. But it feels like that kind of play and then seeing where it goes. And sometimes it goes to very profound and sad places, sometimes funny places, but always a kind of playfulness that's going on to get you there through those kind of exercises is how the book seems to fit together. Is that how you conceived of it as a book?
The process of writing a book is always the same for me in a lot of ways. Even with my very first book, Letters to Guns, which is a book that's rather conspicuously tied together by a series of letters that arrive throughout it, or my third book, Calamity Joe, which actually had sort of characters that kept recurring. Still, the process kind of remains the same, is that I write over a long period of time and I'm not thinking about putting together a book. And the process of going through the poems that I've written over a period of time, because I'm pulled in a bunch of different directions and I'm responding to all kinds of things. But I have learned to review what I'm doing. And I was just talking about this to somebody, rather like somebody reviews surveillance footage, which is what actually much of my self-examination has been sort of going through my actions over a period of time and going, what is he up to? And why did he go in there? And why did he say that? And likewise with my poetry, I look at some, work produced over a long period of time, sometimes years and years and years, and go, oh, this one is kind of speaking to this one, and these two have something in common. Oh, and that's funny. That's the sixth poem in which you mentioned this. And I thought, oh, this is clearly what I'm examining. And then I begin to lay the poems out, sometimes making a pyramid of things where it's like, okay, here's six poems that mention one thing and four poems that maybe do another kind of thing. And I'll put the four poems on top of the six poems and then sort of flatten them out and begin to create intervals between the poems. And then once I've broken my own code, once I see what it is I appear to be writing about, then I might write two or three poems focused on that thing that I didn't realize I was, and then I'll address it directly for the first time, as though that's what I mean. But I mean, it's that kind of a process. To speak to, I know that in previous conversations that you and I have had, and maybe this speaks to one of the other things that you just noted here, a kind of playfulness, is I think astonishment is very important. And I try to remember to be astonished all the time, no matter how routine life gets, no matter how distressing life may get, to be able to sit back routinely and go, it's very strange that any of this is happening at all. And isn't it remarkable that, that I just put some zinnia seeds in a pot and they're actually growing now, and or that or allowing myself to see the world through the eyes of the children whom I work with and their sense of possibility, and they absolutely inform how I approach poetry still, very much with an attitude of like, okay, here's what I think I want to say, and here's what's going on in my heart, but always approaching it with, well, let's see what happens if we try to put something on the page. I'm as engaged as I would be, if I had a sack of Mentos in one hand and a Coke in the other, and going, okay, what's going to happen, if I mix them together and have that sense of, and it's always different, which is to say, that reward has endured as well. I'm still always surprised, and so there was a lot of surprise in the process of assembling this book, and the book was not assembled originally thinking that this was going to be a book, and there were numerous versions of this book. As a matter of fact, I've put together a second manuscript of poems that I pulled out of this manuscript along the way. So, it's a process.
Does that other book have a form, or is that still waiting for the pyramids and all that stuff to emerge?
No, it very much has a form. It's a complete manuscript. It's ready to go. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's it's a small manuscript, and but as I say, I mean, it was, for a period of time, it was a manuscript that most of the poems in it were in opposites game, and they had to come out because as the book took shape, it was like, oh, this one doesn't go in there, and this one needs a different home, and maybe this poem will find a nice book to live in, and, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that sets up the structure of the book too are these divisions you have, and you use the opposites game and setting up binaries in each one. So I'll show on screen for the folks at home. The first part one, is Once Upon a Time, which gets transformed into Twice Never Under. And so it's sort of pulling apart the ways words make us see the world, I think, is sort of part of what's going on, and you're finding too the strangeness. I guess what it does is it finds the strangeness that's buried in the things that we come to take for granted.
Hmm.
Like the phrase
Definitely.
like this, "Once upon a time," is actually a really interesting, strange phrase that we never think of as strange and unusual. But then just by transforming it to "twice never under," which is a very similar
Hmm.
way of seeing the world, it's like that, um, Dead Poet Society standing on the desk kind of thing, or that what
Hmm.
you were talking about. I think you said in a past interview, you imagine like explaining the world to aliens, or being an alien and not understanding to get that sense of astonishment. And so the way
Yeah.
that you use opposites here is kind of a way to cultivate astonishment or surprise, or things we take for granted see with fresh
Hmm.
eyes again. So could you talk a little about that, about how you think about the poems in this book through that framework?
Well, there's a number of poems here where very much, if I'm not just looking at things in terms of uh, looking at familiar arrangements of speech and colloquialisms and that kind of thing, and sort of turning them on their head, then I'm also at times looking at just physical and emotional routines in life and saying, well, what if I actually responded to this the exact opposite of the way you would expect somebody to respond to a thing? So not even just a question of looking for the opposite term, but what would appear to be the opposite, or the least intuitive emotional response. There are some poems in here, though, that are where it's more conspicuous than others. There's, considering the times that we're living in and how carefully we're talking about the times that we're living in. There's a poem in here where instead of looking at the elephant in the room, I imagine what the room in the elephant is like. And you know, um, there's poems in here in which strange natural disasters are looked at as though they were paintings. And you know, there's a poem in here about, that examines the whole question of what if, a rose by any other name, and we're like, well, yeah, like what if instead of calling it a rose, we called it Miguel, or, and those kinds of substitutions. I'm fascinated by what that enables. I'm fascinated by, you know, I think we're much more dependent on the names of things than we suspect, and it takes a very little, a very small alteration to make the world very surprising and unfamiliar again, and therefore filled with a lot of potential. And I think there's a lot of mental health that is available there because it's making the world unfamiliar again in degrees, however minute, that might allow me to re-examine things that I'd given up on as options for happiness, as options for truth, as options for uh, the help and comfort I might offer somebody else, and by making things, go, oh, wait a minute, maybe I haven't really tried this or that approach to life. Maybe I haven't really looked. I was just having a conversation today with my mom about a quotation that has been attributed to many different people, from great philosophers to Alan Dershowitz. I think there's been different people have been credited with having said, "It is during prayer that I have my greatest doubts about God, and it is while looking at the stars that I am able to make the leap of faith." And if I can go back, and find that astonishment wherever I can, I find it very healthy. And here, I try to do it, a poem at a time.
Yeah, well, one of those poems I think is "Crib," which uses the word "crib" in both its noun and verb form, which are so different, that it makes for an interesting, astonishing kind of poem. Do you want to read that next?
Yeah, of course, it's a poem that I'm really tempted to introduce, and I'm just going to shut up. All you need to know, as you pointed out, is it begins with an epigraph, and the epigraph is just the two ways the word is defined in the dictionary. This is crib. Noun, a child's bed. Verb, to steal. When my father was born, they brought him to me, still wet, stub of cord still glowing. They say a father's eyes don't work at first, but his were wide. He stared at me a long time before passing out on my chest. I know he knew me. My mother didn't want to come out. As I labored, she turned suddenly, squared her shoulders. I thought they might open me, got ready for it. But she turned again and came like a dream. That is, she came already come, wearing a veil, a caul. She cried when I peeled it away, which made me cry. So they let us be alone together for a while and didn't cut the cord. They said there was no hurry.
Yeah, it's one of those poems where the silence afterward is filled with things. Yeah.
I flubbed a word in there, but I think I did it justice.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
was
and that's another opposite. Imagine, I mean, I could say, oh, it's you know, uh, it is only a metaphoric conceit, the idea of having given birth to our parents. But this poem started very much with, the sense of actually looking at my parents in my youth, when I was a small child, again in my teens and whatnot, and having the strange, uncanny feeling that I had made them. That I'd invented them or made them up or brought them into my life, that these were people that I'd invited over and didn't remember doing it.
Yeah. One of the things on the last episode we talked about, you said you wanted your poems to be useful more than anything. Being useful is what you hope to be. And I wonder if you could explain more about what you mean about that statement. What does it mean for a poem to be useful to somebody else? It's really clear, we've done a lot of talking to different psychologists and scientists about how expressive writing is so valuable and what you do teaching students to write, bringing their own sort of subconscious desires and fears and things to the surface where they can process them. That's so clearly valuable in so many ways that are measurable and definable. But as far as being useful, the poem itself being useful to someone, how do you define that, and what makes a poem useful, whereas other poems might not be?
Well, it's and that's, I mean, we could dedicate several sessions to that, so I'll try to control my feelings on that one. Um, I remember when I first started to really write poetry in earnest, I mean, and that is to say, to the exclusion of all else, when I thought this is really what I want to do, which really happened. I mean, I can tell you the month and the year. It was November of 1994. And when I realized this is what I want to do. And at the time, I remember very much, the poets that were popular at that time, and the kind of profile that poetry seemed to have, particularly in Los Angeles, where I'm based. I noticed that the word accessibility had become very much a dirty word, and implicit in the way people were using the word accessibility was to suggest that the writer was writing for their audience, that they were responding to popular trends, that they were writing a very commercial poem, a poem that could be sold, that could get read a lot on one precious NPR station or another, and there was a lot attached to it, um, and I remember, thinking, well, what does that mean? And just how great a sin is that? I mean, certainly, I think we tend to do our worst work when we're writing to the expectations of other people. And I don't, so in that definition of accessibility, that's never been particularly interesting to me. And I thought, well, rather than be accessible, I would rather be useful. And usefulness hasn't always meant just one thing. A popular criticism of our time is that there's a great deal competing for our attention and that most of it is nonsense. And I can only agree up to there's a lot competing for our time. But actually, I think what makes it so distressing is that so much of it is genuinely urgent. So much of it is existential. So much of it seems so fraught. And so I'm very aware that when somebody is giving me their attention, if they're reading a book or they've come to a reading, that everything's on me. I know poets who feel like, hey, they're coming to me, I can say whatever I want, and I can shake my fist at this audience and I can tell them all they're a bunch of hypocrites. And that just never struck me as a very useful approach. I feel like they're giving me their time. Uh, so I have a criteria, and my criteria, is like, is the poem honest? Even if I'm writing about people that don't exist in situations that never occurred, I think you can still write a very, very truthful poem. Or as Robert Lowell said before giving a reading, be true and inaccurate. And I think there are different kinds of usefulness. Here's a big kind of usefulness, and I'm going to try to contain this to 30 seconds. I come from a family of actors, and I'm probably going to give you guys a little too much information. But my parents split up when I was very young. They continued to love and admire each other, and it was never. It was never, there was never any competition. My sister and I were never pitted against each other or anything. We loved and admired our parents, and they loved and admired each other. But, a divorce is very difficult, and there were other challenges to the family, and there was a lot of financial uncertainty at one point, and there were some dark periods, and particularly in the 70s. And my mother was getting ready to go on stage in a play, and uh, she was backstage and she opened the curtain. She looked out and she saw they had a packed house. And this was a lesson she gave me. I remember her talking about it afterwards. She said she looked out at the shapes in the audience and she thought, law of averages, there's not just one, there are several women in this audience that are going through what I'm going through. There's a woman in this audience that's having a difficult divorce. There's a woman in this audience that's not sure how the bills are getting paid. There's a woman in this audience who's really worried about the drug use of a close friend. There's a woman in this audience who's going through everything I'm going through. My job is to act in this play for her and take her head out of it for the next 2 hours. And that's my job, and I'm doing this for her. And that was an incredibly, compelling model for me. Whenever whatever I'm going through, whatever I'm celebrating and whatever I'm dreading, I have to think that as I put more and more poems out into the world, they're going to come into the hands of somebody who's dealing with the things I'm dealing with. I think it's, if I like to think that, I don't expect that I can solve things for people. I still tend to suspect that Auden was right. I don't know if poetry can make anything happen. But, and to invoke Lowell again, he actually added on to that. He says, yeah, but I do think that we can soothe and we can comfort and we can inspire and we can compel. We can't necessarily claim to have made anything happen, but I think the poem that I think has a shot at inspiring or that feels like it might be a good use of 30 seconds. Or that, at the very least, if I can say to the reader, hey, I noticed a funny thing. Did you notice this too? Rather than coming from a place of, let me tell you something you don't know. I think that's useful. And I aspire to that kind of usefulness. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And to show it instead of just tell it. A Controlled Substance is a great poem to share next, maybe.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Yeah, let's do that one. All right. This is a poem in which, in a weird way, I've been all of the people in it. A Controlled Substance. My brother is late again. Somehow the glass of water by his plate, the fact that we filled it without him, makes him all the later. Dad tells us to start eating, says there's nothing worse than cold fish. But suddenly no one can find a rhythm. We fumble our napkins like we've never seen them before, like it's just occurred to us we're in the wrong house, aren't even a family, but four people kicked off the same bus for being vulgar. So much is worse than cold fish, I think. The flowers on the table, the bubbles in my brother's glass, the size of our knives, all terrible. There must be traffic, my mother says, and I understand it as a command. Yes, there must be. My brother deserves a good reason, not the only reason that he is deep in his bed, as if at the ocean floor, where it is still the first night on earth, and whatever moves there must grow its own light.
Yeah, and that was a controlled substance from The Opposites Game by Brendan Constantine. And what I love about the poem, I mean, there's so many great, there's some really, really truly funny lines in that poem, and then there's also that wonderful image to end on, and the broader topic that's so deep and important to be talking about. And I love the title because a controlled substance, it's one of those, it's a title that functions so well because you're like lulled into forgetting what the poem was about almost. Like there are different options, there are different reasons, explanations for the story, and then when you get to the end, what we all do when we read a poem is we look back up at the title, and then the title is like, oh yeah, like that's what's going on. And so there's this really circular feel to it because of the way that the title is used to set the stage, and you never mention it directly in the rest of the poem. And so I was wondering about just how you came to have the poem structured like this. Is that something that you knew to do intuitively? Do you remember how you titled it? And how do you think about titles generally? Because they function well in like that in a lot of your poems. Yeah.
You're asking some big questions here. In this particular case, you absolutely picked up on it. A controlled substance is one of the ways in which we refer to narcotics legally, and what does and does not qualify as a controlled substance. And of course, also looking at the word substance as in terms of something's essential meaning, the substance of something, the substance of a family's life, the substance of what we hope our lives are, and what we sometimes have to accept that they've become. I had it's as I tend to say to folks, I accidentally took a bunch of drugs and drank a lot of alcohol for about 12 years, and and I've been in recovery for a long time now, over 35 years. And but that existence, that life is still very, very fresh for me. And I can still call it up very easily. And the sense of, what I went through, and more importantly, what I put everybody around me through. And interesting, you said, there were aspects of this poem that are funny, and they are, and in a curious way, there are situations that come up in that life that aren't ridiculous and absurd and hilarious, if you're able to survive them and stand back far enough and go, wow, what was that? And as far as titling this piece, it was the title had been with me for a while. I didn't necessarily know that it was going to become this poem, but I'd had that title, and my relationship with titles changes all the time. Sometimes sometimes all I have is a title, and I say, okay, I'm gonna, this is what I'm going to explore, and I'll put it as a placeholder. It's always a placeholder. I know that if I'm lucky, I'll have some sort of epiphany along the way, and the title could very easily go. Case in point, I highly recommend looking for a poem called The Garden of the Thieves by Gwendolyn McEwen, wonderful Canadian poet. She talks about that title that you keep in your notebook, and it's going to be for a great poem, but what poem is going to have that title? Titles, I do a lot of writing, though, where I have no idea what the thing is going to be and what it's going to be called, and there are, so I don't have one single approach to them. I know one author who's frequently can't think of a title and is just putting an emphasis on the poem, and will sometimes if they're desperate and they absolutely can't figure out what to title the poem, they'll go to the bottom of the poem and start working their way up about 5 lines from the bottom and then from the end of the line there and start looking in the poem there for any interesting language or juxtaposition of words, and they'll pull their titles out of that. I know some poets who really would just be fine writing poem at the top of their page and just moving on. If I can drop his name, Robert Wrigley, a wonderful poet who I haven't spoken to in a long time. But Robert, I hope you don't think I'm doing violence to you when I talk about how you were saying that sometimes your title is a free line of poetry. You can set up a lot in a title depending on the title. And so sometimes I very much will take advantage of that. But I don't have any one way. I have to imagine, though, for some poets, like, Frank O'Hara did give titles to a lot of his poems, but I've always felt bad for his archivists, because he had so many poems that just said poem at the top, and you just imagine them sorting through them going, which one have you got? I've got 700 poems here called poem. Which one is this?
Yeah, well, let's hear another one of those poems. Let's do Active Shooter next.
Well, that's it. Okay, that's a tough poem. Okay. Yeah. I don't guess there's any actual violence in this poem, but for anybody that, there's nothing graphic in this particular poem. But if the title isn't enough to tell you, it does touch on the subject of mass shootings. This is Active Shooter. It takes 12 minutes to start my mother's day. From the time I wake her to when I set a tray of coffee, toast, a soft-boiled egg. 1 American will be shot in that time, and another 2 before I clear it all away. This morning I find her already wakeful, taking aim with a black remote. On her bed-sized television, the words "active shooter" caption a pair of school flags and policemen crouched in a sandbox. My mother says the words aloud. 12 minutes later, our telephones buzz with ads for activewear. Should I buy her a bulletproof shawl? It's $40, soft, elegant, tactical, good for seniors on the run. Someday there'll be more of us in poems than anywhere else. I wonder if I'll be told to carry a gun as a school teacher, which is to say, I wonder what quitting will be like. Will I be able to live on what I've made? How long before the world is American? The TV has filled with mothers. I blink and realize I'm late with breakfast, late to cut bread, grind beans, late to boil water and put a bright egg in the middle. My mother repeats the words as I step away, keeps saying them like playing out a rope for me to follow back to her. Soft, elegant, tactical. Dear God of the gas stove, dear clock of blue fire, thank you for what darkens in me every day.
Yeah, so that was Active Shooter. A difficult poem in a few ways, a difficult subject matter. Also, because it's subject matter people try to address and are compelled to address, as poets. A poem that's a daunting topic, too, to try to come up with a way to access it that's new. And one of the things that I find really interesting in this poem are the big leaps you have into really these sort of off-the-cuff doses of pure imagination or something. I don't know how else to put it, where you say out of nowhere, where is it? Someday there'll be more of us in poems than anywhere else, which is such a strange line to come out in a poem like this. And then the very end, going to, dear God of the gas stove, dear clock of blue fire, thank you for what darkens in me every day. It's such a surprising place to go at the end of that poem. where we were so tempted to, do some kind of like moralizing or talking at the end. You go to these leaps of imagination in places. It's like whenever in doubt, imagine something. And I'm wondering how you go about that process of leaving yourself open to a line like that. And then also, do you wonder about pulling things out too that don't seem to fit, even though in this weird way they do?
Certainly. Oh, certainly. Because I'm very aware that what I might think is an intuitive leap, somebody else might go, where did that come from? I think we're all. I mean, I think we. I think that's it's that exact dynamic that causes so many of us to fall in love with one another. You know. Is what seems intuitive for us seems to be, just, the most unbelievable leap, for somebody else sitting next to us. How would you go there? I will say that, particularly when it comes to the end of a poem like this, it's strange, when in the about 2001, 2002, I was working on a bunch of different kinds of poetry, and the seeds of a book, my first complete collection, Letters to Guns, had begun right around that time. And guns had made a figure of themselves in my life, and then very soon after the fall of 2001 in everybody's life. And it's weird because they've continued to sort of come for me. They won't go away as a subject. They demand to be addressed. And as an educator, certainly, we're at a time right now where my school, the high school where I teach, continues to have active shooter drills, although we're not calling them those anymore. Now I think they're called lockdown drills, or although I did challenge the kids to come up with what they thought those drills should be called, and it resulted in a poem I can't seem to finish. But I mean, there are a number of places when you engage with a subject like that where it would seem natural to go, and but I've never really believed in tying things up with a bow, and I think that. One of the things that I think we get to take advantage of as poets, and I don't mean to say that writers of long form don't have this going for them. We've all certainly read, the same, well, maybe I shouldn't say all of us, but a lot of the people I know who love books will read the same novel over and over again. They'll read a whole novel 2 or 3 times. Poetry, though, I tend to think is something that absolutely invites us to do that all the time. And I do try to write poems that I think you would be willing to go back into, to go visit again. And I know that if I tie things up with an aphorism at the end, a hyperbolic example would be if I was going to write about Ukraine right now or Iran, and I ended my poem with "So war is bad" or "War is terrible." Well, that's a poem that you're never going to go back again. To borrow an image from Mary Carr, you're about as likely to go back to that poem as you are to work the same crossword puzzle a second time. I mean, you just, and that, to my mind, isn't a useful poem. The useful poem is the one that would strike a bell note at the end, that would have an echo. There'd be some reason to come back into it. If Shelley's Ozymandias was all about hubris, then that poem ends at "nothing beside remains" and the abandoned, partial statue of Ozymandias. But Shelley knows this is a poem. You don't leave it there. That's not what this has all been about. And that is why round the decay of that colossal wreck, the lone and level sands stretch far away. That enables the entire poem. That's a poem you will go back to, because once you have closed the book and put it on the shelf, you are still traveling across the desert. Something is still happening. The poem is still at large. It's still alive. It's breathing in the book. It's pushing against the covers. And that is what I see. So, for an ending of a poem like this, by the way, I have no illusions. I did not write anything like Ozymandias here, but I do. Same principle, though, for me, as far as how I would end a poem and what I would ask a person to consider, on a poem on a subject like this. I don't need to tell you that mass shootings are terrible. I don't need to tell you that the bodies seem to be piling at our door. I'll have to go somewhere else. I have to talk about how am I living with it? Are you living with it this way too? Have you found anything to be grateful for, even if it is the sense of hope that you carry that is darkening and darkening every day, So, I think that's an answer.
Yeah, definitely. Great explanation. Let's go. I'm looking at the clock. Let's make sure we get to more poems. Let's do Kleptopolitan next.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, let's do it. All right. It's a poem I have to thank a lot of people for. This is one of the few instances where I was commissioned to write a poem. This poem would not have happened without the folks at Beyond Baroque having commissioned me to write a poem for a special event, and then, but it was an event where it was, the end result was that we were going to read these poems, but there wasn't a publication or anything, and then I sent the poem some years later to the folks over at Poetry Northwest, and they were very kind and put it out. And then it got, as a result of that, it got the attention of some poets who helped sort of expand the sort of profile of this poem. I'm very grateful to Mary Jo Salter for telling folks about this poem. And yeah, it's a poem that's had several lives. And that's another thing that I need to emphasize. I just had the book launch for the Opposites game, and I never thanked the people at Red Hen for putting out this book. I never thanked my publisher, and I can't. They gave me a career in 2008, and I am so grateful to them for this collection, and for the opportunity to be reading you this poem today. This is Kleptopolitan. In my living room, I have a painting of my living room. I once got as far as the kitchen of the wrong house. My wife refuses to call herself an artist, which means her paintings are nobody's business. The one of the living room was done by someone else. I have nagging suspicions I've yet to discover. The most popular street name in America is Park. The second is Second. After that, it's mostly trees and presidents. The fear of crossing a street has 3 different names. I wrote this lying down in a driveway. When I look at a star, any star, I remember no blade of grass can keep me here. My car came with maps to the rest of the country. Every morning, the windshield bears the prints of some small predator. I look through them, driving to work. To the best of my recollection, I've never fallen asleep. Today, as I pulled up to my house, a man got in the back and gave me an address. When I told him I wasn't a taxi, he apologized and got out. I pulled away again and drove aimlessly. My wife sleeps like a professional artist. I've been accused of bias toward robots. My most frequent dream is about losing my car and then my clothes. I must search for them, naked, all the time, hiding from help. It ends in a park the size of my life. It's the second page, and this poem has a home, a wife, a car, and a job. In the coming months, it will grow uneasy about its advantages. My wife is painting a painting already painted. If this were a children's song, someone would be trapped inside it as a warning. In the future, our homes will be inside us. We will fill the rooms with art and strangers.
Yes, that was Kleptopolitan from the Opposites game. Also appeared in Best American Poetry,
It did.
2024, I believe. Yeah. So, yeah, wonderful poem there. And again, those leaps and that willingness to turn and sort of break the fourth wall and talk to the reader halfway through the poem too. So much play going on in all these poems. It's surprising to me. It's so hard to write a poem for an occasion, like when asked, like on command. And yet, you did here in a poem that works very successfully. Is there any advice you have, or how do you approach that when somebody asks for a poem? Because it's so different than the usual process of play. Like, you have to find a way to keep playing, I guess, is the key.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think some of it, what's interesting is I think sometimes where you get into a lot of trouble is to attempt to try to write specifically to a subject and sort of force that subject into whatever it is you're going to write about. And I think if you just give yourself a little credit, that is to say, you know what it is that you want to be trying to write about. So now that you know that, just write anything. Because there's a part of you that's going to take over. At least I've been very lucky when I thought, okay, they want a poem on this particular subject. Now I can try to track down a bunch of things that are relevant to a particular issue and write about them. But at least for my first few drafts, I should really just start writing. I shouldn't worry about necessarily trying to get that topic or that motivation into it because I'm already aware of it. I've already got it. It's not like I need it taped on the wall in front of me while I'm writing. Okay, now remember to get this in there. Maybe it's because the very idea of being asked to write something is also terrifying to me. And I know that terror is not going to go anywhere. I don't need to be reminded of it. So in my own way, perhaps obsequious way, I will be writing to that, whether I'm putting effort into it or not. It's going to happen. It's going to start landing on the page. I know certainly the longer I keep writing, the odds get better and better and better that this subject is going to just find its way in there. I'm reminded of a friend of mine whose father had died, and he'd wanted to write about his father's death. He was a famous poet, but I'm not gonna say his name here. And he was struggling to get his dad into all of these different poems, and his father didn't fit, and he just kept forcing him in there. And somebody else had to say to him, look, you want to write about your old man. You just need to be writing and listening for his knock. He will tell you what poem he wants to enter, but you have to already be writing it. And at some point, your father will enter the poem that he's supposed to be in. And that approach has absolutely not failed me. So with this particular case, with this particular poem, the themes that they gave me, and I'm quite honestly, I'm not 100% sure I can remember all of the themes they asked me to tackle at the time, but I do remember that I just started making lines and eliminating white space on the page, and suddenly the thing began to emerge, and it was there.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem. But first, I should say, if you're enjoying this conversation, and so many people are in the chat window on YouTube, I see lots of people loving these poems. If you're enjoying this, make sure you click the like button. There's always twice as many people watching at least who have clicked like. The more you click, the more it sends people out these videos into the YouTube's mysterious algorithm, so make sure you click like. Also, if you have any questions for Brendan, leave them in the chat window. I refocus on YouTube, but other places too. And put question all in bold so I can see it as I scroll through. That helps a lot. So do you want to read the next poem, Brendan? It's There Is Blood on Your Mother's Brain.
Okay. All I'll say about this is my mother is okay right now. She went through some trauma in 2024, and I was I was out of town, and the family was telling me to stay where I was and not come home, and to wait for more information before I came home, and of course, and I was being told, even my mother was telling me, no, stay where you are and write. And of course, once you know that, your mother's in the hospital and she's, and her condition is very serious, I'm like, what do you mean stay where I am and write? And there I was sort of faced with the blank page going, oh, yes, I'll just sit and write my opus now. I was totally distracted. So again, I just started writing what was happening and what was in front of me. And There Is Blood on Your Mother's Brain. I hold my phone like you would if a stone started talking. warily, ready to drop it should it ask for blood. There is blood on your mother's brain, it says. Not a lot, but we want you to know. There's no compression, it says, no risk to any structures. We want to keep her longer. So do I say, and wonder what structures I'd find in my mother's brain. The house where she grew up, the convent school, the rowboat she loved on Misery Bay, all of them bright, but for a little blood, not enough to feed a stone. Do you have any questions? The stone asks. I do. How do we clean up the blood? Will it stain her days? If more blood comes, can she get in the boat? It's a difficult time, the stone says, but she's in good hands. I look at mine, the lines in them like channels, each one crossed by another.
Yeah, another powerful and imaginative poem that is There Is Blood on Your Mother's Brain from Brennan's new book, The Opposites Game. One of the things, I don't know if we've talked about this before. I was skimming through some old stuff to make sure we cover different things. And I don't know if we've talked about performing poems yet. You do it so well, and, someone might say, oh, he's an actor in a family of actors. It's just second nature to perform poems. But of course, there's skills you learn, and there's things that would be helpful if poets did a better job of. It's an oral tradition, and, we tend to be nervous and read our poems really quickly from paper and don't act them out, don't do all the things you need to do to engage in an oral way. So how do you approach performing poems as opposed to just having them flat on the page?
Well, this goes back to what we were talking about usefulness, because that usefulness also extends to how do I offer a poem to someone? It's not just whether or not the poem itself is useful, but the act of sharing it. And I do think that and I realize that I'm in danger of saying that, making this sound like I'm saying, oh, this is an easy thing to do. And I realize it's not necessarily. It can be very difficult to get up and read your poems for people and to make that sound at all natural. As Fernando Pessoa said, typically with poetry, you're speaking against the true nature of speech. How are you just going to, make that seem anything but idealized? But I feel as though, once again, there I am asking for your attention. And I feel like I could, that I should at the least put as much into sharing a poem with you as I would telling you about my day or asking about yours. That I am not up on a plinth looking down at the audience. We're all, in fact, seated together in the same waiting room. And I'm looking over at you going, so, what'd you do today? And here's what I did. And I heard a joke and I heard a story from a friend. And I'm going to tell it, I'm going to relay the poem exactly the way I would do that. I was fortunate enough, my family, my mother and father both were good friends of an actor and playwright named Jack Colvin. And Colvin is probably best known to audiences as the actor who played Jack McGee on The Incredible Hulk, who was always trying to get to the truth of the Incredible Hulk. And but he was a brilliant writer and teacher of actors and whatnot. And he used to talk about different performances that he would see. And it's funny because I see this exact same dynamic on poetry stages. He said that there were these three approaches that he saw more often than not. There was one approach, there was the person who got on stage, and their attitude was very much, I have as much right to this stage as anybody in this room. And then there was the second approach that was, oh my God, if you don't love me, I'll just die. And then the third approach, and the infinitely more useful approach, was, listen, I have a plan. And that was the state of mind. That was the way to approach the performance on stage. That was the way to approach the soliloquy. Not I have as much right to this stage as anybody. Not if you don't love me, I'll die. But listen, I have a plan. And that's very much guides how I present a poem to an audience. I hope that's useful. It's worked for me.
No, that sounds like great advice. And sort of a follow up to that, do you feel poems are more the sounds of them being read aloud that you would perform, or is it more the poem on the page? Or is there a distinction between the two, or are they the same thing?
I think they're facets of the same diamond, but I think that, and like a diamond, however, you may only have the opportunity to experience it from one angle. You may never get closer to it than across the room, and that's your experience of the diamond. But I do think that, uh, whether my concerns as a writer should be more how it sounds or more what it's like to perform it. I really want these poems to work on the page. I I don't expect to be here very long, and I would like to think that these poems will live, at least a week after I'm gone, and that somebody who, can't hear me, I want these poems to work for people that will never meet me and will never hear me. I really hope they don't need my help. But again, if I am going to ask you to listen to them, then I need to put something into that. I need to make an effort, and that's not to say I have to act the poem out, but and as I say, I know it can be very difficult to do. I certainly can't condemn anybody for how they get up and read their poems. And if they get up and they just read everything in the same flat monotone, and that's the best that they can pull off that day, then bless them. But if you are at all comfortable on a stage with a microphone in front of you, and you can at least get it together to take a deep breath and inhabit that space and go, okay, I can take my time with this. I can put some thought in how to deliver this. Then I think absolutely, it's good manners to try to put something into it. So it isn't even a question of, do I think how important do I think performance is, as far as, making a good poem. I just think if I'm your guest, I should put something into that. But when I'm writing poems, I'm not necessarily thinking about how they will perform. And if you'll indulge me, for one slight digression on this, I think I'm older than you. And when I was a kid, I remember one of the very first digital toys. I think one of the first toys that actually had a digitized voice that wasn't a recording of a human voice, but that was a digitally manipulated voice, was a toy called a Speak and Spell. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter how lovely the word was that you typed into it. You would type in a word and you'd hit a button and it would say the word back to you. And it was an educational, but it didn't matter. I mean, if you wrote, a butterfly, it came out butterfly. And for a long time, when I was first writing poetry in earnest, and I was very aware of this idea of page versus stage. I would quite often hear the poem in my head the way the Speak and Spell would say it. And I would say, okay, if this poem can be read with absolutely zero emotion and not putting anything into it, if it still works, then I'm on the right track. If there's, so then that was one way that I could tell that maybe something was happening in the language that did not need me to emphasize or underscore it.
Yeah, that's great. The Speak and Spell test. I think we should all put our poems through that.
Yes.
Well, here we have 2 poems left. Let's do Sometimes the Stork Eats the Baby.
Okay. Yeah. All right. This is one that now that the book is out, I've been introducing to audiences as I have to say, for everything I've said over the last hour about usefulness and generosity of spirit and whatnot, this one's really for me. And this is one of those poems that got very little encouragement when I first got brave enough to share it with people. I got a lot of raised eyebrows. I got a lot of do you need to talk? Is everything okay? And nobody wanted to publish this poem. It kept coming back. And then I even went to a good friend of mine. I said, I can't seem to give this poem away. And she said, well, let me hear it. And I read it to her and she went, yeah, I don't think anybody's going to want that poem. And, but here it is. Okay. So this one's for me. This is Sometimes the Stork Eats the Baby. It doesn't happen as often as you'd think once you start to think about it. That is, the stork is typically patient with a human infant, even an unpleasant one. So it's rarely a question of rapport. And babies don't go down that easy, not like fish or money. But sometimes the sea is wide. Sometimes a power line will look like it needs your signature above it. Then the stork may pause in its flight, might harbor a doubt. Even then, they're pretty forgiving of themselves and the sun. They usually go on. But sometimes there's too much night or not enough jungle. Sometimes there's only you. Then you might do anything to get back a little innocence, a little what happens now. And sometimes the baby is sleeping, the baby is awake, the baby holds your toe with its whole hand. In darkness, the stork folds the blanket, leaves it on a beach, leaves the blood, if any, on its beak, and flies back to get another baby. It's not sinister. It's not what you're thinking. The next baby makes it home. The stork, renewed in its purpose, seldom eats another.
That's great. That is definitely very surreal and strange. Sometimes the stork eats the baby. And yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I could see that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for letting me share that one. That one did eventually get a home in an online anthology assembled by David Garrian of California Poets, and he took that poem. He believed in sometimes the stork eats the baby. So thank you, Dave.
A couple of questions from the audience. Let's see. Laura Berg wants to know: are you the I in these poems?
Not always, no. But I'm good friends with the I, and and I've been over to their house. But no, I'm not always the I. Sometimes I am, and other times. And when I say that, and by saying that I'm not, let me say, I mean, of course I am, but I also believe, what makes it difficult for me to completely own it is that, like a dream, I'm everyone in it. I'm the antagonist and the protagonist. I'm all the props. I'm the forest. I'm the table. Uh, you know, uh, you know, what is it? Brian Eno says Blank Frank is the air raid. He's the siren. He's the crater. He's on the menu on the table. He's the knife and he's the waiter. I hope that's not a frustrating answer. When in a poem like Active Shooter, I would say in a poem like that, then I'm very much me, saying I, but not always, and not once in the book, in a collection of poems I have called Calamity Joe. That's never me. But then Joe isn't himself either. So I don't,
Yeah, it seems to me now it's kind of like you develop a large language model of your own in your own mind by reading a lot and by you're developing your own voice. And then you're giving all the different aspects of yourself and of your imagination controls of that model to use as they see fit, and that's how all of the different surprising things come out. And that's how even when you're writing in persona, it's like your imagination of being that person gets to speak, and so it's this like fractional fragment of you, and it's all you in a way, but then not you in some ways, because there's the I that sort of you talk to yourself in your head with, and that's a different one.
Have you heard that recording? There was a great big gift edition of poets reading their own work. It was a great big glossy book. I think it's called Poetry Speaks.
Yeah, we've
Remember
got that
this
on the
thing?
shelf.
And it came with a thing called a CD. And you would, and there were these, but there's a great moment in here. John Berryman and was famous for writing the Dream songs. And he had a character in the Dream songs named Henry. And people his entire career kept bugging him about Henry and saying, "Are you Henry? You're saying I, and you're, clearly there's, stuff that Henry does mirrors your life, but at other times it takes a departure. Aren't you Henry?" And there's actually a recording of him reading it where he digresses and he says, people are always asking me this, and they're dream songs. Not only am I not Henry, Henry isn't Henry, he's asleep. So I tend to think like, yeah, I think that's still true for me. I'm in a dream.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great way to put it. Another quick question, or that's a long question. I think we could make it maybe the elevator version. Deb T wants to know, what were the circumstances that occasioned you knowing the exact date you decided to be a writer of poems?
Oh, because I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, it was actually just dumb luck. I tried all kinds of things. I thought I was destined for all kinds of things. Like I said, I was very lucky to have affectionate and supportive parents, whose emphasis was always on, was I happy? And whenever I talked about what I thought I would do with my life, they just thought, well, if there's some joy there, then, we're behind it. And I'd been encouraged to be an actor, and I seemed to have an knack for drawing and painting. I was good at taking pictures. I had all of these things that I could do a little bit. But I tended to back off of them when they became work. When it came to photography, when I really had to get into the mathematics of light density and whatnot, then I lost interest in it. And acting, when I found myself really up against, the difficult subtleties of developing a character and learning lots and lots of text and whatnot, again, it became work, and I couldn't stay with it. Poetry was the thing that distinguished itself by virtue of that I stayed with it after it became difficult, after all the encouragement had dried up, after everybody had stopped saying good job, when really tough criticism came in, when I was confronted with the absolute, glacier of things that I would never live long enough to learn about poetry, that I still wanted to do it. And that all started in November of 1994 in a cafe in London. I'd gone on a trip with my father. He was helping me at a difficult time in my life where a bunch of stuff had sort of imploded, and I had a job that was going nowhere, and my marriage was ending, and um, there was a lot of, he said, look, I'm going away to London for months. I don't even know how we're going to pay for this. And I don't know what you're going to do about work when you get back, but you know what? You should just come with me anyway. And so it was sort of a leap of faith. And we went and we lived in London, and we got an apartment there. And there was this one afternoon in November when I realized that my father and I had been coming to the same cafe every day. And while he worked on this project that he was doing, I sat and I wrote in a little book. And I suddenly looked at what I'd been writing and I thought, well, they're not stories and they're not songs, but they seem to do a lot of what, the same things. And I went, oh my God, you're writing poems. And it had been going on for months. And I hadn't really, I had never really thought about what I was doing. But suddenly I just know that everything sort of changed that day. And I started paging back through the book going, how long have I been at this? And I'd filled this notebook with these, and they were terrible. They were awful poems. They were dreadful, dreadful poems. But I was hooked. I was like, oh, maybe this is what you do. Maybe this is what makes sense. And I got back to the States and I stayed on it and stayed on it. And the next thing I knew, I was meeting other poets, and it has just never stopped. But it was and if I hadn't been out of the country at that time, and therefore by virtue of the sort of event of having lived somewhere else, I probably wouldn't be able to pinpoint when it started. But because it was such it was connected to a time of such a upheaval, that I know it was November of 1994 that I kind of came to in a cafe and went, oh, this is what you do, and I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's a great story, and we're definitely grateful that you did. Let's wrap up with one last poem, Brendan, Ahead of the Weather.
Oh, right on. Okay. Ahead of the Weather. Um, yeah. Thanks very much to the editors of the Panifold magazine, which is a beautiful and young journal of art and architecture and literature. And they were the folks that first took this poem. And I'm only saying that because I want that magazine to thrive. They were really, really cool folks, and I appreciate the editor sort of taking a chance on me with that one. Ahead of the Weather. I've numbered the pages in the book for the intellectual, and suddenly, oh, there it is. Okay, page 76. Okay, here we go. Again, thank you so much, Timothy, for asking me to participate in this. Thanks to everybody that has reached out in the chat. Thanks to Red Hen for letting me have this book. And this is Ahead of the Weather. The clouds are stacked on the hills. Gaunt milkweed and switchgrass trade a whisper as we pass. You are wearing the coat I always liked, the one with a red collar and L-shaped pockets. For a few steps, we share the same thought. Surely by now, someone has figured out how to keep a moment alive. Maybe in a lab full of tubes and beeping. If the man who owns this field has learned to keep birds away without a gun, how to tell lies convincingly to a horse, even how to feed oxygen to his wife, then when the nurses are busy, then certainly the technology exists to keep our arms linked and the grass from finishing its secret. And then a little lightning comes. We slow for the sounds, have our own thoughts again. Mine are about the day you bought the coat. It was summer, and you didn't need it. But that collar, the pockets, the small belt in the back, like a sea captain, were clearly meant for you. You pull your arms tighter. The whole world, you say, is written down somewhere.
And that was Ahead of the Weather by Brendan Constantine from his new book, The Opposites Game. Brendan, thanks so much for being a guest and for joining us. It's been such a pleasure for everybody, a real treat for everybody watching live, and we'll be listening and watching after the fact. Thanks for being here, and thanks for doing what you do. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm a dedicated fan of Rattle and everything that you do. I take the magazine regularly into my classrooms. I regularly encourage my students to submit. And we're very grateful, by the way, for the Ekphrastic Challenge. You've gotten a lot of folks writing.
Me too. Well, thanks so much for that.
Thank you so much for everything you do.
Yep. Thanks, Brendan. Take care. Bye. Yeah, it was Brendan Constantine. You can find this book, The Opposites Game, from Red Hen Press, or his website, Brendan Constantine, just how it's spelled, just how it sounds, Brendan, Brendan, Constantine, CONSTANTINE.com. Find The Opposites Game, all of his other books there on his website, and do pick up a copy. All right, we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And we're also going to reveal our prompt poet of the month. So we got a lot of excitement going on. Actually, it's already revealed. We know who, because it was the poem of the day today. But we will get to hear live from Marylisa in just a moment. And we'll also share our poems from this week on the invited prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem that rallies against its own epigraph. That was the prompt for this week. If you had a poem and you submitted it by Sunday night at midnight, Katie every week invites a few poets on, maybe 10 or so, to share their poem that you submitted. But you have to submit it by midnight on Sunday in order to be considered. And but you can always consider it or have it submitted for the prompt poet of the month anytime between now and the end of the month. Anyway, we'll take a quick break and be right back with our invited prompt lines. And we're back with our creative editor, our prompt poems editor, our my wife, Katie Dozier.
That's the tricky one to remember.
That's the tricky one. Hey, Katie, how you doing?
I love that conversation so much. I mean, I feel like anyone could listen to that last hour and just come out of it a good poet. Like, I think there was so much good advice in there. I loved how he's just so wonderful at expressing it, too.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, really, the poetry is like he eats, sleeps, and breathes poetry, I think. And
yeah.
Great things come of that.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to listen to it again for sure, too.
Yeah. Well, we have exciting time right now.
We do. We get to announce the winning prompt poet of the month, which neither of us can say, but we can believe in. And it's really exciting, too, because it is someone who is a regular among us, we can say, I think, safely.
Yeah, definitely. Marylisa DeDomenicis is here. Hey, Marylisa.
Hey.
Hi.
Well, Marylisa, it is so wonderful to have you on in this capacity. And this poem that you wrote for us, when you first read it for us, I really had to fight myself from crying on the show. And I feel so much, having listened to the audio of you share it with us. And I think it's really one of the most powerful poems I've seen in a very long time. So first, thanks for writing it. And then are you willing to share it with us?
Of course. Thank you. And thank you for the prompt. And I really hoped that it also, that it related to all parents, because our children do grow up so quickly. And it's just, okay, I'm just going to read the poem because I don't want to start crying. On reading Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, the ocean snarls. The gardens lose a minute of light each day. Time devours notions I held as I released my infant into its infinite arms. That we would not be divided by time, like time, not be broken down, action by action, memory by memory. Marked grudges sparked by new conflicts and old grievances. Grim and gross and ghostly reconciliations listed in the ledgers of our minds. Will I lose him entirely, my son? My black son who grew beneath my ignorant but willing to learn white skin? Will I lose him in pieces that cycle and mimic the shapes of the moon? One sliver of white left just for me? Enough light to admit I exist? I've never been beneath his skin. I know I can't know the depth of his discomfort or his pain. How deep, how widespread, how intense. And yet, yes, I speak in my own defense, as she predicted I might, when one white woman wrote all white women are fragile, innately racist. That we shouldn't cry if a black man dies, unless we're out of sight of black women. I wonder, does that include my husband, my son? What world is she from? She advises I can't ask a black friend anything about being black. But how would I know how to twist my son's hair into dreads without the help of his grandma who showed me the way? How could the white advice writer see everyone as placed in cardboard shoeboxes, each apart and separated by color, placed on shelves? I want to say, girl, take back your book, your fence, your wall, your locked gate. You don't know our history, only your own. You haven't had the pleasure of sitting to drink tea while chatting with Granny, whose granny was raped by a sharecropper. You've never been forced from a shop, refused an apartment, once your child appeared from behind you. Have you prepared in advance for the worst, when your child takes long drives at night, just for the freedom? Maybe to play loud music and sing out loud, or think out the tensions of his life? Yes, I'm angry at what you write, but I'm more furious with time. Its distance. I think time, take back your rust, your grease buildup, your dust, your death. But take your time about it. I need more of you. I despise your wreckage, but love my son, grown, still cradled in your arms. I love the gardens you allow and the ocean. My cats need tending. I try to keep up, scrub the rust, wipe the dust, clear the grease smears and the ink of books by self-proclaimed experts trying to blot out the last slice of light from the moon. I want to rise too.
Marylisa, it's so just wonderful to hear you express that and read it to us. And I have to say, I think anger is the most difficult emotion to express in poems, and it's why so many political poems, for example, I think don't work, because we can get enraged and then it spiral off into not being a poem. But you keep it, at this level where it's also grounded with the allusions to the moon, and then also through asking these questions, we're really part of your journey and get to really experience feeling it with you as much as could possibly be the case. So
thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you again for choosing it and for giving it an audience.
Well, it's definitely our pleasure to get to do that. And I also, with how you're talking at the beginning, well, is this relatable? I think it's definitely relatable. I can relate on the level of when I read experts talking about autism, with my daughter and feeling, speaking for all situations, and that can be really infuriating. And for the most part, I think we're all just trying to do the best we can, right? So
Absolutely.
at least there's that.
And finished your book, by the way. Speaking of, yes. Speaking of autism and communication. Loved it. Yeah,
thank you. Thanks. And then I have to say one more thing apropos of your conversation earlier, which is this idea of the poem continuing on and having that sense of it still, like the beautiful rise as a meta at the total end of your poem, where we're not expecting it, and yet it makes us feel somehow like the hope of a mother's love, guiding us and everything. So it's a really beautiful ending. I love that too. So.
Thank you so much for your beautiful words. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you, Marylisa.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marylisa. Really, people say brave poems, but it's a brave poem to throw that opinion out there. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
It was scary, I have to say. All right, thank you.
Thank
you.
Good night.
Yeah,
Good night.
Okay. So that was Marylisa DeDomenicis, our prompt poem of the month this month.
She's been part of the Rattle community for so long that you learned how to say her last name like 3 times. She's been with us for a while.
It's a tricky one.
I was scared to say it.
Well, I jumped in there for you, though.
It's beautiful, though. Okay.
It is.
Right,
It's
thank
great,
you.
All right. Now it's time for our poems.
Our poem share.
Okay.
Okay.
So the prompt, we got to refresh everybody's memory.
Including
this
my
week's
own.
prompt. Yeah. It was write a poem that rallies against its own epigraph. Okay. And what'd you come up with?
My poem is weird.
Her poem is weird.
All right.
She says.
Here we go.
Okay.
I was inspired by, last night we were reading the Opposites game and all the play that is in so many of Brendan Constantine's poems, and I wanted to get a little crazy myself. So.
All right.
Okay. This is a blurb. Dozier takes us on a breathless, spellbinding journey in this poem. Unflinching, it is a gripping tour de force, a searing love letter to love itself, a mesmerizing page-turner whose timeliness couldn't be more on the pulse of the current moment.
Oh, sounds like a blurb there.
I must confess that I've already flinched while writing this. Nothing makes me want to blink like thinking about blinking. I've decided to write this poem with the light of a single light bulb that, too, is blinking. Unsure how to point my wand, I may have dropped it. We are going nowhere. Slowly. Believing the cuckoo. Cuckoo!
Yeah, well, that haiku, the little duo stitch coup at the end really sells it, I think,
thank
Katie.
you. I'm sure Basha would appreciate the illusion.
He definitely would, yeah. Yeah, so that was Blurb, a really fun poem. And
thank you.
So how did you come up with the blurb?
I don't know, that for various reasons I was thinking a lot about book blurbs today, and we joke so much about the use of unflinching on and there's so many words that are just hilarious, and they show up all the time in book blurbs.
It does imply that there's a lot of flinching going on.
I know, it's really
I was about to write, then I flinched.
I know, it's really an unflinching look. Sorry, it's very fun to read them like that too.
Yeah. Okay. A very fun poem. Thanks for sharing that, Katie. And then mine, I went with this. This is one of those poems where I couldn't have written it in the old format because the 1-page max. But now I can write super short lines and stretch it out with the silence.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't written in this sort of mode in a while.
I see yours as a slightly more serious epigraph than creating your own fictitious blurb about your poem.
This is a quote to confess. I think about all the time, and then I feel bad about myself for thinking it.
Oh, that's terrible.
So anyway, I thought it's the one that popped into my head. Anyway, it's called Our Side. Hell is other people. Sartre. But so is heaven. Both are crowded. Neither exist. Still, they share a common wall. Some kind of stone, more crude than you'd think. It stretches farther than anyone can walk. We spend our days running our fingers over the rough mortar, pretending. That's it. That's the poem.
It definitely needs the space.
Yeah, you need the
So
space
that's
there.
interesting.
Yeah.
And thanks for pointing out that feature of the way we do the invited prompt lines now where we don't have to limit the page. And it's kind of eerie to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we'd still had the 1-page max if Marylisa would have written that beautiful 2-pager.
That's totally true. And
that's scary to think about because I love our
really
poems so
is.
much.
They wouldn't even exist. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Well, I'm glad it exists.
Yeah, definitely. And then I really don't miss the whole opening up a file and that's more than 2 pages, but how much should I say anything about it? I didn't even have to care.
There were a lot of awkward
sit
situations.
back and enjoy these poems.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. And we have great ones too. Especially I think this week, a lot of really cool takes and inspirations.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. You told me that earlier, and
I did. I called out to you to be like, there are so many good poems this week.
Yeah, and I get to just sit back and enjoy them. It's really nice. And let's start with our community host, Dick Westheimer, who knows to unmute himself. He's just so skilled like that.
That's part of the community hosting skills.
It definitely is. Dick can't see it, but I finally made him his own little name at the bottom of the screen because I was tired of just saying prompt lines underneath Dick every week.
Yay. That's cool. It only took him 3.5 years.
Yeah. Well, anyway, congratulations, Dick. We have your name and location underneath.
You're going to have to tell me more about that at some point, but it's such a lovely time to come to a Rattle interview and just leave, as you said, Katie, a better poet. Hopefully, it'll sink in over the next couple years. But some great work there. Well, I wrote an open letter to Dante. Because, and like you, Tim, I have a little heaven and hell. In
Don't
my
we all?
poem.
No. Okay.
Yeah. So this is an open letter to Dante Alighieri. I can't pronounce his last name. Regarding leaving the door to hell ajar. And this epigraph is the very last line in the Inferno when he climbs, out of the pit, and
Spoiler alert. No, sorry.
well, there it is in the from there we came outside and saw the stars. And I thought, that's an easy one to push back against. It's still early, and the magnolia trees have already shed their prom dress blossoms. The red bud's petals hide behind leaves meant for May. Summer just muscled its way in here in March, as if you, Dante, left the door open when you climbed from hell. And why not? You were just passing through on your way to Purgatorio's communal baths, where you'll wash the sweat and grime of your sins and leave the rest of us dealing with what you let out. Sure, you climbed Lucifer's spine and earned that one clear night when every star ever seen shone. What of us who remain, illuminated not by the heavens, but by used car lot and highway and high-rise lights, where 3 circles of the inferno burn all day and scour 1,000 stars from the sky every night? You can keep your Imperium. Just leave us here with the other 9 spheres, the spinning gears of the story of time, the queens and kings of now and now and now.
Beautiful sounds in that one. Very
definitely.
musical.
This feels like the kind of subject that could fill a chapbook if you went through the whole Inferno and talked about various ways you disagree or agree with it.
Well, it's such, it's such a magnificent work of imagination, and so pushing against it felt like, I don't know, poetic sacrilege. But yeah, it's been, our march here was really hot, and it's shades of things to come. So how could it get that way unless Dante would have just closed the damn door when he climbed out?
Like we're always telling the kids. Yeah.
Yeah, close it up. Close the refrigerator door, guys.
Yep.
Good.
All right. Well, thanks, Dick.
Thanks, Dick.
Appreciate y'all. Bye.
Yeah, that was Dick Westheimer, our community host on the Prompt Line series, which is going to be community reading,
the last
which
Sunday
is the last
of
Sunday
the month,
of every month
with special co-host Dion O'Reilly this month.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
Chance to share more poems. Speaking of more poems, though, let's go to some more poems. And next, that's a great segue. That's what you do.
That's a postmodern segue.
It is. When
Speaking
you're a veteran,
poems,
you can let those roll off.
Yeah.
It's like nothing. Okay.
I'll keep that in mind.
Let's go to a first-time caller with Chris Sikora. Oh, no, not a first time. Chris has been on before, right?
Last week.
Yeah,
First
exactly.
time.
Pulled it up.
Sorry,
I
Chris.
think we were
Pretty
distracted
close.
by the
No worries.
awesomeness of your shirt.
I think so.
First time with you both here. So
Yeah.
we'll
There
take
we go.
that.
That's it. Yeah. Well, thanks for Chris for being here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I'll give just a little bit of context to the epigraph. So on the poetry space, I was listening to recently the episodes with titles, and there's a lot of discussion in there on Dylan Thomas and the famous villanelle that's called For Better or For Worse, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. And in my about 20 years of working with the dying, I thought, I sometimes run into that, where there's a family member who does not want their loved one to go away, who's slipping away. But more and more, I run into situations where people themselves are struggling and fighting and doing anything they can tooth and nail not to peacefully go, for better, for worse. They just haven't done the work, and people die often as they live, but that's a whole other thing. So anyway, I thought, well, then I read the prompt line. I said, that's my epigraph. Do not go gentle into that good night. So it's from Dylan Thomas, and then I decided to do an after Dylan Thomas poem, Villanelle, as well. And then the title, because it was that subject from the episode, there's a section in there where Dick Westheimer actually says, well, this is what I would have called the poem. And he goes on and gives this amazing but super long title. It says, a man rages against the inevitability of his father's death and tries to drag him back and keep going. And Tim's like, that's way too long. So I with in deference to Dick, I used a portion of that title, sort of the opposite. So this is called, a man doesn't rage against the inevitability of his father's death and doesn't try to drag him back. Do go gentle into that good night, for there are few who let go this way. Rest, rest into the coming of light. Most struggle and suffer and fight, grasping hard this borrowed breath and clay. Please go gentle into that good night. Aged ones ordained for life, despite what the hinting stars try to convey as they take their rest with coming light. To savor lakes sparkle with delight, to softly consider life's array, then gently go into that good night. Release weight, complete work, now contrite of heart, grave witnesses on display, for the rest can't rest in coming light. Dear Dad, don't delay, your train leaves tonight. I recite your prayers with tears that say, do go, gentle man, take leave, good night. Resting breath, hush now, becoming light.
Yeah.
I thought this was so beautiful, and it definitely caught me off guard with the title and the note, and then I was like, oh, it's a really sweet, beautiful poem and a wonderful way to think about death and our options that we have. And I was really struck by it. I think it was a really, really amazing entry into this poem that you've created.
No, thank you so much. I also have a dad who in his life has raged a fair bit, and so part of it was imagining, am I going to be able to give him this wish, and that's my wish for him. So yeah, thank you so
Right.
much for the opportunity.
Yeah, very
thanks for
sweet. And
writing
yeah, and
it.
a great thing to talk about too.
Yeah,
It's
it
one of those
really
things
is.
where we don't hear it enough, or,
Yeah, you
or
don't.
if at all. Yeah,
We
yeah.
need to think about it more. Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
And nice to be here with you this week.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah. So that was Chris Sikora
with
A Man Doesn't Rage Against the Inevitability of His Father's Death and Doesn't Try to Drag Him Back.
nice.
All right. Yeah. And go next to Sean Evaningo Sanders.
Hello.
Hi, Sean.
Hey, Sean. Good to
doing?
see
Good
you.
to see you.
Great to see you too. I was trying to write a comment on Chris's poem, so I was thrown off. God, what a fantastic interview with Brendan. I enjoyed that so much. He is just so exciting to listen to, and lots of food for thought there. This is a fun prompt, and I didn't know how I was going to get started on this, and where I was going to find an epigraph or whatever. But I was looking at some old vintage ads, and I was thinking about the whole trad wife trend, on TikTok.
Yeah.
And that led to me finding this quote from in a hilarious advice book about to get women back in the day, like when they're trying to find a husband and keep them. So as a swirl of things that kind of came together and I had fun with.
Great.
A trad wife's tale. Nothing appeals more to a man than immaculate cleanliness. Eleanor Glynn, 1925. She was dove cooing in a bathtub. Nothing perfumed, unscented. Best not to irritate. Primped and preened and ready at dawn for a sink full of dishes from last night's feast. A helper for her would have been nice, but apparently hamburgers in more need of assistance. Despite all the ads she has seen on TV, she's never met that woman who is happy about doing yet another load of laundry. She'd fake a smile, add a scoop of cheer to her Maytag's maw, with an insincere shout out to lipstick, his collar sporting a shade of red she never could pull off. Poppies, waking up in a daze.
Sean, I laughed, and then that haiku at the end of the hyphen is like, really takes it into a more serious point and everything too. So I thought it was brilliant. I felt like too, sometimes I read these poems and I think like, this was written to a better prompt than the one I gave. It's like how it feels like as you did something that was like really challenging, I think, and so I would have loved.
I think your prompts just have this way of taking all the things that have been like swirling around in my noggin for weeks and finding a way to like grab it and put it all I hope you enjoyed it as much as I feel it should have been enjoyed. Okay. It was fun for sure.
Right. Well, great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, Sean Evaningo Sanders with A Trad Wife's Tale.
I wanted to come up with a quick brand name pun, but I couldn't do it in time because she put every brand name we use in the poem.
I think she did. All right. Next, let's go to a first-time caller. I think I might be right this time. Jeremy Gottfried.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Hey.
Yeah, great to see you, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying hearing all of this great poetry.
Definitely. Where are you calling from?
I am in Brooklyn, New York.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. I'll just say a couple things. This poem, I kind of grew up in a family that loves a good deal. And I've also been hearing a lot of people talk about third spaces lately. So I feel like it's just kind of on my mind a lot, the way people take care of each other in the world. So yeah, this one came out of that, I guess.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's called One Blank's Treasure is Another, or One Blank's Trash is Another Blank's Treasure. In my building lobby, there's a table where neighbors leave their unwanted things for neighbors. Bags of cables and knots. Bags of fresh clothes already out of fashion. cans of soda, half-used boxes of oats, bags of cosmetics discarded by our resident beauty influencer. From this fountain of too guilty to trash, I've obtained a flat-screen TV for my bedroom. Later, a bigger and flatter TV that I swapped with the first one. A crab finds a slightly bigger shell, leaves the old one on the beach for another. A silicone spatula set that has become my most used kitchen tool. A hand-sculpted teapot set that I later put back because I was afraid to drink from something so delicate. 3 kitchen stools, an old DSLR camera, a fancy bottle of cologne I spray once each morning. I, too, have left clothes, cosmetics, groceries, furniture down there. I left my childhood wooden wardrobe closet that my dad built. It was taken by a neighbor in less than an hour. When one neighbor moved in, I warned her, "Don't leave your bike there. Someone may think you're getting rid of it." She gasped and thanked me profusely. When our landlord died, the table became a memorial with flowers and photos of him, the ever-present handyman in his 80s and always tinkering, DIYing plumbing and electrical fixes, wearing overalls, teasing us youngsters. Sometimes plants, sometimes lingerie. And if someone doesn't take it, a good Samaritan relieves its original owner by sneaking it to the trash bins outside. In our next day delivery world, I spent a whole day cleaning someone's dog hair out of a RoboVac to reclaim it as my own. I wouldn't call it treasure. Still, we share.
Wow.
Well, that's a very sweet poem, actually.
It really is. And Jeremy, I love all the details in this. You know, I was so taken with the story and you really created this world. I could totally picture it. And I think my favorite detail, though, is the Good Samaritan delivering the item that wasn't being taken in the trash. Because also, too, we have a poetry box on our yard. And like I go out there and I'm like, oh man, nobody's taking this. And nobody knows but me. But I feel like I can feel the pain for those poets that don't know. But yeah.
As someone who sort of believes that it's sort of when you give someone something that you don't want anymore, it's not exactly doing them a favor. I think it is sort of a favor to like throw something out for someone that they can't go over the hump of getting rid of.
Definitely. Well, we loved hearing about it, and it is sweet to think about people trying to take care of each other in this like, you know, slightly like secret Santa type way, you know, too. So thanks for writing it and sharing it tonight, Jeremy.
Yep, thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, that was Jeremy Gottfried with One Blank's Trash is Another Blank's Treasure. Let's go next to Kimberly Gibson Tran. Hey, Kimberly.
Hi.
Great to see you.
Good to see you guys live.
Yeah.
So, I have a confession about my poem. I've had a hard time finding a good epigraph. I would just put so much pressure on it. And then like one of my poet friends, but not from this group, had posted on Facebook this epigraph and was like, does anybody remember who this is attributed to? And then I like looked it up and I'm like, okay, I got it. But we don't overlap groups here. So maybe she'll forgive me.
That sounds kind of like somebody left it out at the table and you took it from Jeremy's poem epigraph. They weren't using the epigraph. You took it.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the perfect image for me. But anyway, my other confession is I don't really know what this poem is about exactly. So bear with me. I think it's a bit of a work in progress. So, all right. Here it is, self-portrait in a pink robe. I paint myself because I am the subject I know best. Frida Kahlo. Last night, I couldn't stop watching videos of filthy rugs under power wash, mud-caked disgraces. How in heaven did they ever get that way? After some decades in the world, I think I know. The real miracle is the rouge of foaming chemicals the dinge liquid that can't stop its gray, rinse after rinse. I was 6 at my baptism. The little tub was clear when I got out, a waste. And the memory of how I got here fades like a ray-drenched painting. When I was 7, I remember lying. No one had to tell me to. Sometimes after, I'd forget the truth. These layers smother the floor. I don't think I know myself, hardly other people. My dad, I did watch, hidden under the Hotel Twins bedsheet, his quirked expression across the room, the glow of HBO. At the time, I couldn't really follow, though I could tell there were 4 magical women, shoes and shopping bags in tow, drinking pink from glasses bowed into triangles, roving New York City. I've been trying to guess for so many years how to peel.
Well, I think it's really interesting what you said at the beginning, too, because I didn't 100% get it, but I was excited to go on the journey with you. And I thought that entry into the power rugs, like, I don't know, like a year ago, that was all Facebook for me. Those videos. So I could relate very much to that, too.
Yeah, I love the details.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
For taking a chance on me. I think I'm still working on it a bit. That's so nice to join the group tonight.
Well, great. I really
thanks,
enjoyed
Kimberly.
reading it.
Yeah.
It was fun. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Kimberly. It was Kimberly Gibson-Tran with Self-Portrait in a Pink Robe. Next, let's go to Brian O'Sullivan.
Hello. Good to see
Hey,
you.
Brian.
Hey, Brian, great to see you.
Thank you. So yeah, I kind of challenged myself to come up against the most authoritative author I could think of, and committed, like Dick, I guess, committed sacrilege in the process. So there's this. It's called Watching the 10 Commandments on Easter Saturday. Thou shalt not covet. God told me that, but God help me, he just might be wrong. I'm afraid that I shall covet. I even covet uncovetousness. I see weary Moses take his staff and set aside his wishes and find a kind of peace. I envy him. Maybe I should lead a no king's march, resist and never cease, until I've seen my misled country freed. But then the commercials roll, and I desire a new cell phone, a BMW, a trip to Ireland, a delicious fire-grilled Whopper, any juicy distraction that you can imagine. I turn off the TV and go to sleep, and dream of idols in a fiery heap.
Yeah, that was really funny, Brian. Yeah.
I didn't notice too before you just read that it's Easter Saturday, not Easter Sunday.
Yeah, well, that's when I actually watched it. I wake up having dreamed of the burning idol, so yeah.
Yeah, really cool. And a sonnet, no less.
Yep,
yeah,
definitely.
Thanks so much for sharing
Thanks,
that, Brian.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, it was Brian O'Sullivan with Watching the 10 Commandments on Easter Saturday. Let's go next to Doug Frituck.
All right, hi.
Hi,
Hey, Doug.
Doug.
Great to see you.
Yeah, it's exciting to join us tonight. You're usually
Yeah,
a
nice
no
to
checker.
be back. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I found this epigraph on Instagram. It was just one of those philosophy quotes that just sort of pops up randomly here and there.
Yeah.
And it was soon after I'd heard the prompt, and I said, well, let me try this one. So here's the result. Phenomenology. Why should I fear death? If I am, death is not. If death is, I am not. Epicurus. It's like that old drawing of the duck rabbit, the one made famous by Wittgenstein, and later Billy Collins. Only death is the duck, and I am the rabbit. So if you see my pink nose twitching, my slender ears pulled back, death must have his head in a pond, his tail feathers upright as a tombstone. But if you glimpse death's dripping beak, his cold and beady eye, I vanish quicker than a snowshoe hare in a blizzard. My fur slippers and cottony tail, no match for the steady thwap of death's webbed feet, whose approach is enough to send a shiver through my pelt.
Great ending.
Yeah. Well, Doug, I thought it was just a really brilliant metaphor you found in this. And I think that's a really cool leap to go from that epigraph, to that specific drawing. And it makes sense as the poem unfurls. And yeah, it was really interesting. And I guess it shows Instagram can be interesting.
Yeah. Definitely.
Every once in a while, but thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks so much, Doug.
See you.
All right, great. Thanks.
Yeah, that was Douglas Fridek with that's a hard word to say. Phenomenology.
Nice.
There we go.
I had to Google it.
Phenomenon. Okay. Let's go next to Matthew Scoggins.
Hi, Tim and Katie.
Hi.
Hey, Matthew. Great to see you.
Thanks so much for having me on tonight.
Yeah.
Kind of nervous, but very excited to be able to share a poem with so many great poets. So,
great.
We're all excited
awesome.
to hear it, and I really enjoyed reading it. Before I even got to hear you say it, I think it was really interesting what you did here. So
Yeah, definitely. Is this your first time, Matthew? Yeah. First time
it's
on?
not. It's my second. The last time Katie also wasn't here, same as Chris earlier. Yeah.
reconnecting with friends that are new and old at the same
Yeah.
time, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, well, great to see you back.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. This poem was inspired by my own research. I was writing a poem and submitting it, and I was like, wait, can I even say this in my own poem? And so I tried to find the instruction, and I did. So here's So the poem is Dandelion. Senior personnel are highly encouraged to include a disclaimer on personal social media communications. A sample disclaimer reads, "The opinions and views expressed here belong solely to the author and do not necessarily reflect those of the DOW or its components. All NAV 8025 social media guidance for uniformed service members of the Department of the Navy. Desert breeze, seeds scattered in the sand."
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So I have to say, when I read this, I called up Tim and I was like, "This is fascinating. Somebody made a hyphen out of just a quote and then adding a haiku and a title," and I thought it was really brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it operates just like a hyphen with the dandelion there.
Yeah, and
it's like a half-found
I
hybrid.
know. I was
Yeah.
saying it's like how you could call it a found hyphen. I was thinking, I don't know if you've done this before, but I think it's really cool and really powerful in a way to respond to an actual event, or and it works so well that it's so like almost medical disclaimer type language, and it works really well.
Yeah, the contrast is huge.
It's really neat. It exactly is. It allows for more juxtaposition, especially with talking about dandelions and the opposite of something that's really hard. So I think it's really, really cool where you chose to go here.
Yeah, I'm surprised I've never seen that.
I know.
done
That's
before
how
on
I
a
feel
hyphen.
too, which is
Yeah.
always like a good sign. We've seen a lot of hyphen, right?
Yeah.
So really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Very
much.
Yeah. Thanks, Matthew. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks. It was Matthew Scoggin with Dandelion.
Some really cool poems. I love how different everyone approached
such
that
great
too. It's
variety
really
today.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that is wrapping up the prompt lines, but it was a wonderful prompt lines for sure. Now let's see our haiku for this week. It's time for that. What do you got for this?
I don't know. I wrote a lot this week.
You wrote a lot of haiku and a lot
did.
of poems. You were like a writing fiend.
I was. Yeah.
I don't even know if you could you count how many poems you wrote.
I think I wrote like 20 poems.
Yeah.
If you don't count the haiku, if you count the haiku, like 30.
Yeah, that's impressive. All right.
All right.
Let's crank them out.
Bluetooth speaker connecting my voice to this poem.
That's really great.
Thanks.
Okay, and this was mine. A little scene we saw on our bike ride this afternoon. Painting the bridge the color of rust, she shrugs it off. There you go. Painting the bridge the color of rust, she shrugs it off. That is my haiku for this week. And that is the show for this week. Now, next week's prompt is going to be this.
We are going to write a villanelle that features something you see every day, and you're the only person in the world that does.
Interesting. So a challenge with a villanelle form, but it's a fun form.
It's a very fun form.
It's a
there
great
shouldn't be a
form.
but there. What was the wrong conjunction you should? I object.
Well, I only because we're writing a hyben every other day for
Yeah.
our book, and we could write a villanelle hyben. I guess.
Let's see. A villabun.
A villabun. Yeah. We might go to Cinnabon and make a villabun.
Cinnabon at the villabun.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
Anyway, that is our our prompt for this week to write a vanilla novel that features something you see every day and you're the only person in the world that does.
I love imagining everybody like having like a monocle, like looking at the world like, wait a second, what is it that I see? I don't know. And a chance to think about what's unique about our perspective, I think, individually.
Yeah, very crafty, very interesting prompt there,
Thanks.
Katie. All right, and then the guest for next week is going to be Matthew Buckley Smith. So subscribers know his book, The Soft Black Stars, wonderful. I think the best chapbook we've published of all the chapbooks. It's great.
It is great. Yeah.
And and we've published a lot of them. And Matthew Buckley Smith's Soft Black Stars came with subscribers for all with a spring issue of the magazine. He's been a guest before on Rattlecast, somewhere around 100. And it's great to have him back too, a formal poet. And we'll be talking about this book, reading from that, and a whole lot more. So it's going to be a fun episode next week. Rattlecast number 338 with Matthew Buckley Smith. Back to Mondays. It's this one Tuesday is strange. Don't take it for granted. But it's Monday, April 13th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.